Okay, you're live with the guy. I don't have my producer Nat here today, and we got some disappointing news. You probably already heard Charlie Kirk has passed away. He was a big influence not just on me, but on this channel and Nat in general. When we first started, oh, one moment. I'm trying to run a bunch of different things without Nat here today, so. Okay, there we go. He's a big influence on not just me, but Nat in this channel. I remember when we first came up, it was a time of major censorship and not a lot of people were speaking up. I was speaking up in my personal life, but I had not yet gone on YouTube or addressed things very publicly. Charlie Kirk was an inspiration like a lot of other people at that time. He became more than just an inspiration for free speech, but in a lot of other things as well, to become politically active and to address subjects that weren't easy to address. So I just like to say thank you to Charlie Kirk and everything he had done over the years. And let's get into the show, I guess. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Oh, Rafa's here. Good morning. Good morning, Rafa. Sorry if I'm a little bit off today. I'm trying to read the comments, do the camera switching, read the articles. So we'll see if we can't get through this. Okay, let's switch to the articles here. Okay. Well, I don't. Some people may or may not have heard, but they did find the weapon of the shooter. It was out of the woods and out in the woods just beyond the college campus where this had happened. They have really good footage of the shooter, so I would expect the shooter to be caught within probably the next few days. The FBI said they're currently using AI technology and other things of this nature to identify who this is and then conduct a manhunt. If that technology seems to fail in any way, shape, or form, then they will release the video of the shooter's face, which they do have right now. So this is extremely good news. The fact that this happened at a college campus, I did suspect there would be a lot of video footage. If there wasn't video footage, it would have been extremely suspicious. The weapon they did find was inscribed with a lot of leftist and trans ideology all over the weapon. So as a lot of people suspected, this is definitely politically motivated. I'm going to expect that if the shooter is not caught, that potentially the shooter would end themselves before that happens or attempt to flee the country. Okay. And okay, with the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the left has really reacted very horribly. I watch a lot of leftist politics, and I was especially tuning in yesterday when the news kind of first hit to see what the left's reaction would be. So let's see what Rafa said here. There's danger. Yeah, he's saying trans people have become a concern for everybody. And yeah, not just the radical trans side of the left, but the really progressive far left has become extremely violent in recent years. I was watching a lot of leftist media yesterday, and they were trying to justify this by saying the majority of the violence that happens is from the right. It's always the right. That's not the case. That used to be the case, and I'm more than willing to admit that. But in the last few years, there has been a huge transition where a lot of these mass shooters are from the left and are trans. The other day, we kind of went over the list of trans shooters. There's been 6 trans shooters in the last 2 years, and one was non-binary. So that's 7 mass shooters in the last few years have either been trans or non-binary. So there's definitely a shift happening. These SSRIs and a lot of other mental health medications that people are on are not the best thing, I would say. That being said, the left yesterday was really trying to justify all this, and it was really despicable. I was originally tuned into Wick TV. He's a traditional liberal. He was the least radical of everybody, but even his reaction wasn't the best. Destiny, who is a very, very famous leftist content creator, his takes were absolutely horrible. He was probably on a stream for 4 or 5 hours. I would keep going back to his stream just to see if he would change what he was saying, and that's not the case. He was just calling Charlie Kirk despicable and a lot of other things, saying this is Donald Trump's fault, this is the right's fault. There was an inability of the left to really look inwards here. Another big leftist content creator is Vosh. He came out and he had a very similar line to what Destiny was saying, and it's just completely despicable. This is an opportunity for the left to kind of get their house in order. A lot of the people on the left have been talking about they need to get rid of the radicals in the movement. The radicals are really starting to run the liberal movement or the leftist movement. Now's the opportunity. Now they have a reason to kind of get rid of the extreme progressive wing of their movement, become a lot more moderate, and get in line with the majority of society here if they want to have a political fighting chance. I'm very interested to see what Candace Owens is going to come out and say. Her and Charlie Kirk toured the country for years with TPUSA when Candace was part of the Daily Wire, I believe. So we'll see what she says. Not right now, but she released a statement, but it didn't go very in depth. As far as the left goes going forward from here, you're going to have 3 major figures, and it's going to be very interesting. You have John Fetterman and you have AOC, who really represent the left and the right wing of the Liberal Party. You also have Gavin Newsom that's kind of in the middle. I expect Gavin Newsom to start looking a lot more like Fetterman after this incident. Charlie Kirk was actually a friend and acquaintance of Gavin Newsom. Surprisingly, Gavin Newsom invited him on his show for one of the first episodes. I was very surprised. They were very cordial to one another. Charlie Kirk gave Gavin Newsom a lot of advice on that podcast, and Gavin Newsom seemed to have listened. Okay, let's go into another article here. And sorry, this is my first day doing the show by myself. So, okay. We kind of talked about this thing going on in Nepal a few days ago. I talked about it on my pop culture show. We also talked about it on me and Nat's show together. By the way, me and Nat's show together, we'll start again next week. She's in Vancouver right now. We had some technical issues getting my audio to work on OBS. So I'll do my show by myself. She'll do her show by herself. And when she gets back, we'll do our show together. But this thing going on in Nepal, it's hard to get credible information. It's almost all Western sources that this stuff is coming out. There's major corruption allegations. A social media ban was attempting to be implemented in the country. A lot of the youth within the country seem to rebel because of the social media ban. At least that's what's being put forth in the Western media. I don't know if that's to be believed or not. I want to wait a little longer until I actually pass judgment. These color revolutions like that are happening in Nepal are very, very common for the U.S. to conduct in other regions of the world. They conducted one of these that was successful in Ukraine in 2014. Another one was conducted in Bangladesh recently. So to say this is a completely organic movement, I don't know. It seems to have all the hallmarks of outside interference. Nepal was a very communist country, so is it necessarily a bad thing if this color revolution happened? I don't think so. So as more information comes in on this, we'll kind of talk about it. Another government that's falling apart right now is France, and their government has completely fallen apart, and they're going to either have to have new elections or Macron's going to have to appoint a new prime minister in there. We'll see what happens. There's also a third option that Macron could resign. I highly doubt that that's going to happen. The globalists over in Europe are really anchored by three countries. That's the UK, France, and Germany. The strongest of those three countries right now are Germany, but even Germany is extremely weak because they lack the natural resources such as oil and natural gas, at least at a cheap rate. Their manufacturing and businesses are fleeing the country at an unprecedented rate right now. They used to have very cheap energy from Russia. That's what allowed Germany to really anchor the EU. Without that, the entire EU is kind of coming unraveled right now. France, even before this kind of happened, it was suspected because one of the economic ministers came out and said France is going to need a bailout from either the EU or the IMF. France is a extremely big country. It's an extremely big, has a lot of social programs in France, more than any other country in the EU, I believe. So I'm not sure if the EU and the IMF are even going to be able to bail it out. Another country that's going through similar things where they may need a bailout is Britain. I've talked a little bit about it over the last week. Britain's going to probably need a bailout. They can't get it from the EU because they're not part of the EU, I believe, but they will need a bailout from the IMF. This is going to put a lot of pressure on the IMF, the EU, and all these countries. Okay, let's see the next article. God, it's a lot harder doing this without Nat. I swear to God, I wish he was here right now. Okay, Elon Musk endorses Conor McGregor for Ireland president. Here's how it happened. Okay, let's kind of talk about this. And this has been a big subject matter I've kind of been bringing up on the channel. But even before I was doing any videos and things like this, when I was still living in Canada, I was talking about Conor McGregor was well placed to become Irish president. I thought he was well placed back then. Now he's extremely well placed. The Irish government has completely turned their back on the Irish people. It's extremely left-wing, extremely progressive. The EU in general is really cracking down on free speech. I personally follow a lot of content creators from the UK, from Ireland, and from the EU. They are really having to watch what they say and the way they present it. With what happened to Charlie Kirk recently, I'm really expecting the US, JD Vance, Donald Trump to go over to the EU and really set the EU straight when it does come to free speech. Now, when Elon Musk was involved in American politics, he's kind of taken a backseat to American politics. He hasn't been to Washington in quite a few months now. I don't think he has any inkling of kind of going back. He'll quietly do things behind the scenes. I watched an interview with him yesterday actually saying the government can't be fixed and he's going to stick to private business now. That being said, his money will go a long way in a lot of these other countries. It costs a lot of money to influence elections, whether they're local or major presidential elections within the US. But places like Ireland, places like Canada, your dollars go a lot further. Just his basic endorsement of Conor McGregor and free speech and X is going to go a long way in Ireland. I know when I used to post stories about Conor McGregor, man, through the roof these numbers would go. As of recently, since he's kind of announced he was going to run for president of Ireland, it's been completely throttled. It's some of the lowest episodes I've done is when I put Conor McGregor on the cover of the thumbnail. One moment, let me open my chat here. It's been interesting to analyze a country that has no or few social programs. Not sure if that exists. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Let's go back to this Conor McGregor situation. As far as being president of Ireland, it's more of a ceremonial position. It has very little power for most people that have that position. I think for Conor McGregor, it's completely different. He's going to use this as a way to rally the citizens. rally other politicians, rally potential politicians, and bring to light subject matters that the government over there really just doesn't want brought to light. So I think he can actually do a lot in this more ceremonial position than anybody else ever could. Now, I'll be the first to admit, yes, he has a drug and alcohol problem, and he has a lot of things in his past that would probably work against him normally, but politics in Ireland and the UK have gone so far off the rails. You're going to need somebody radical and somebody that can't be smeared, because he already has a past that's kind of blackened. So I do hope Conor McGregor gets in. And there was an article I was reading from an Irish newspaper that they were doing polling, and it shows that he's going to win this thing in a landslide. That is if he can get in. Conor McGregor has claimed that he has enough political support. Basically, other politicians have to sign off on you running for president. I didn't know if he was going to be able to get that. He claims to have that. There are parties in Ireland that saying nobody in their party is going to sign off on him. So it's going to be interesting if he makes the nomination. If he does make the nomination, I would definitely expect him to win. Another wrinkle to this is in 2026, the UFC, that's the Ultimate Fighting Championship, is going to be holding an event at the White House. It sounds like the headliner of that event is going to be Conor McGregor, or he is at least going to be on that card. So it's going to be very, very interesting if the elections are held before or after that, and how that goes into this entire thing. Okay, let's go into the next article here. And we got the Supreme Court lifts limits on LA immigration raids. So this the California Supreme Court had kind of stepped in and halted those raids, saying there was U.S. citizens being exited from the country. This article is actually a few weeks old. This was a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court, which outranks the California courts. And they're saying Trump can now go ahead with the raids. With this thing that happened with Charlie Kirk, I'm going to expect highly criminalized cities for the military to go in. That being said, the next article we're talking about is actually related to this, and maybe I'll go right into it. And that is, here's how Chicago is preparing as a possible National Guard deployment looms. And the truth of the matter is, over the last few days, Trump has really backed off of this, and so has the other people in his administration. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, it looks like they're kind of backtracking on this and saying, well, if my city was as violent as Chicago is, which they're having almost 100 people wounded on an average weekend, and almost a dozen people shot at any given weekend in Chicago, that they would want the National Guard there. The thing is, the people that are running that city, that is a Democrat city. It is also a what do you call it? A sanctuary city. So they protect illegal immigrants within those cities. They say it seems like whatever Chicago did and the resistance that they had put up is really backing off of the Trump administration. I don't know if he's still going to go in or not, but I would like to see more investment in the police force and the police implement the laws, not a military force. I don't want to see the United States or any other country militarized. I currently live in Mexico, and Mexico is somewhat militarized. There are police officers and military on a lot of corners and things like this. That being said, I don't want to see that happen in the United States. They do already have police. If these Democrat cities would just implement the laws, they can clean it up without military. The problem is a lot of these Democratic cities refuse to implement the law. Even a lot of these red cities are refusing to implement the law. That's why Trump is wanting to bring in the National Guard, but there's a lot of repercussions to bringing in a military force into these inner cities and to these streets. It really consolidates power. And even though Trump's in power, and I agree with a lot of what he's doing, I don't want to see the Democrats potentially win the next election and then either re-implement or continue to implement military force on the streets, but redirect away from the criminals and go after citizens or voter groups that they don't like. So I do want to see the United States be cleaned up. I just don't know if I want to see it cleaned up through a military. I would like to see major investment in the police forces, and these local police forces do that. It's a shame that politics have really gotten in the way of the police doing their jobs. Okay, let's go into the next one. And what is this one? Oh, this was an interesting story. And I've kept up on what's been going on in the Russia-Ukraine war since the very beginning. I've watched about 3 to 4 hours when the war first broke out for the first year or two while I was at work. That's why I could listen to it so much. Over the last couple of years, I've kept up about an hour a day on war mapping, the major events that's going on over there. But recently, what's with Russia violating Polish airspace? That's the title of this article. Trump reacts to Moscow drones with in a NATO allied country, which is Poland. Now, that being said, I don't believe this story at all. There's been multiple occasions where Ukraine has actually had strikes within Poland trying to fake like it was the Russians, and it came out later it was actually the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have also bombed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has recently come out, and they've recently released a lot more evidence showing that it was one of the high-ranking officials within Ukraine that planned this and put a military force out to do this. They're bombing their own EU allies, trying to make it out to be like it is Russia. Russia wants Eastern Ukraine, and they want an off-ramp here. The problem is the EU needs a war. They need a war in order to bring a digital currency, to bring in an authoritarian government, they need to turn the EU people against Russia. And up to this point, Russia has always been willing to sell the EU oil, so it's been extremely hard for EU politicians to villainize the Russians. What they expected to happen was Russia to turn off these pipelines. When they turned off the pipelines, people in the EU would have begun to die because of cold, starvation, manufacturing would have fled from the country, and then it would have been an easy sell to the EU people to say, it's all Russia's fault, it's all Russia's fault, we got to go to war with Russia. But Russia didn't turn off the oil. There is an interesting oil deal that have recently happened, that has recently happened with China. So most of the EU oil that was going to the EU that the EU was trying to refuse to buy is now going to China. China has signed a major deal with Russia. So even if the EU wants the oil back now, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it, but at this point, it's too little too late. The EU politicians have done everything they can to tell Russia they don't want the oil by putting sanctions on them, by bombing their own pipelines. There's been multiple pipelines bombed. So as far as this story goes, I wouldn't believe this in any way, shape, or form. I would completely suspect that this was either an EU country that wants to escalate this war, or more likely Ukraine. Russia claims to have satellite footage of these drones actually being launched from Ukraine, and they want to have talks with EU leadership to show the evidence. The EU is refusing to look at the evidence or engage in talks, which is also very interesting. That cannot be, guy. Chicago has very strict firearms laws. And yeah, they do have very strict firearms laws like a lot of Democratic states. He's being sarcastic here, I'm assuming. Chicago and these other Democratic cities are trying to fight gun violence by outlawing guns. When you outlaw guns, the only people you're taking the guns away from are law-abiding citizens. The criminals really don't care, and they're going to get a hold of these guns. And now unarmed civilians that are unable to defend themselves have no way to fight back against criminals. And that's the issue with Canada. Canada right now is trying to strip gun rights from Canadians. And what you see happens when you strip gun rights from Canadians, you have no way to defend yourself in your own home. Especially imagine a single mother or a single woman in a house with a baby. How is she supposed to defend herself from an intruder? It would be an impossible. The great equalizer is a gun. Also, if your country is facing an invasion or something like that, even if you don't have a military force, but every citizen is armed to the tooth, it becomes very hard to invade that country. It becomes a guerrilla war. Okay, let's see what the next story is here. Oh, there was something I was going to say about. Oh, that's what I was going to say about gun rights with Rafa saying something here. And that is, in Mexico, it's very interesting. Your outline, in general, you're not allowed to have guns on the streets or closed carry, open carry, anything like that. So what happens is only people that are really allowed to have guns en masse are going to be the police and the cartels, the criminals. And regular civilians are trapped in the middle, and they become a victim of both groups that are armed. Okay, Hamas, this is the next article here. Hamas claims leadership survived Israel attack in Doha, but confirmed 6 deaths. And this is a very interesting article because Qatar is one of the big allies of the United States. It was involved in the Middle East peace accords. The fact that Israel bombed this without any approval. What actually happened here is they invited the Hamas leadership, which a lot of the higher ranking Hamas leadership actually lives in Qatar. A lot of their banking is in Qatar. Israel invited these people for negotiations, peace negotiations, and Israel thought these high-ranking officials were at this location, so they bombed it. They weren't at the location, but it looks like 6 others had died. They missed their target, and there's a lot of international blowback on Israel for this, and rightfully so. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. It's one thing if you're going to bomb Palestine or Iran and other countries like this, but even a lot of that hasn't been able to be justified appropriately. But now you're bombing allies of the United States like Qatar. This is be the equivalent of Ukraine bombing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You're bombing your own allies, which this is becoming a little bit ridiculous. That being said, going into this, you're like, what the hell is going on with Israel right now? They got 7 wars going on, 3 with actual physical countries and another 4 going on with individual groups, terrorist groups or other groups of that nature. I was looking a little bit more into this, and this next story, this is the red heifers. I don't know if a lot of people might not know about the red heifers or have a lot of back biblical knowledge, but this was a story I was keeping up on for a long time because I had found that they had bred 21 red heifers at a certain point that had all red hair, not a single white hair on them. And this is what was called for in this sacrificial ceremony that Israel wanted to do in order to build the third temple. They've now done this sacrifice. They're claiming it was a test dry run, but people that were at the ceremony are now coming out and said, no, it was not a dry run at all. It was a 100% legitimate ceremony. The sacrificing of the red heifer is supposed to bring the coming of the Antichrist and the building of the third temple, I believe it is. There's currently a mosque, I think, where the third temple is going to be. There is rumors that a lot of people in Israel are actually digging under where this mosque is, trying to get the mosque to collapse so they can come in and then build the third temple. Why do I bring all this up? Because of what happened with Qatar, them Israel really bombing and having a lot of wars within that region. And it seems a little bit unjustified with some of the targets they're going after, like in Qatar. There are people within Israel and maybe even within the United States that are trying to make biblical prophecy come true with not only the red heifers, but the building of the third temple. Well, I was researching the third temple. It's very interesting. They have a gold coin you can, I believe, currently buy. On one side, it has an image of what they think the new third temple is going to look like. Their architectural designs are already drawn up. And on the other side, of all people, it has Donald Trump, which was a little bit interesting. But supposedly you can buy one of these coins and it will grant you entry once the third temple is built. So very interesting what's going on there. And let's get into the final story here. And if you don't know about the red heifer prophecy and stuff like this, it's a very interesting conspiracy theory to kind of dig into. I was digging into it about a year ago. And when I seen this story re-pop up, I was actually surprised it had happened and it didn't have more news. When I was researching this red heifer story, it was actually very interesting. There was somebody at that red heifer ceremony that went on Timcast and actually brought a little bag of the ashes with him. The red heifer ashes are actually mixed with water from a certain river, and it's supposed to have magical healing powers according to the prophecy. Anyway, this gentleman had a bag of this, and he said that the ashes were distributed to hundreds of people at the ceremony. Okay, and the final story of the day is Swedish health minister collapses live on TV during her first day. And I had actually watched this. She completely collapsed. The whole podium came forward. When I first seen it, I was thinking, oh my God, this had to be from the jibby jab. She's claiming it was low blood sugar, and she didn't die from this. She just passed out. So do I want to necessarily jump to it's the jibby jab? It could have very possibly been low blood sugar, but we have seen a lot of people dying suddenly and under suspicious causes. So hopefully she's better, but that was the last story I was going to kind of close with today. And without having Nat here today, man, I am extremely nervous. It was very hard to do this episode. So thank you to Rafa for tuning in, and for anybody that watches this on replay. And congratulations to Rafa on his new kid, Walker. I hope you get better. And that's it. Adios. Okay, let's see if I can stop this.